Today we have a Maytag dryer that is turning on and spinning but not creating any heat. So we're going to go over some real easy ways of fixing that problem. In this instance we have a vent pipe in the back that goes that way and then goes straight up. So it tends to get a lot of accumulated lint and that makes it overheat. So that's probably what happened. First thing we're going to check though is make sure that both the breakers are in the on position. So electric dryers have 2 breakers in the breaker box. Let's go check that. So we're at the Home's breaker box and we're going to look in here. We have one that says dryer. So these two, this is 20 amp and a 20 amp. We're going to turn them all the way off and then turn them all the way back on. So one of these is used to spin the dryer and show the lights, and one is used for heat. We don't have heat, so you got to make sure that both on your electric dryer are in the full on position. Let's see if that did any help at all. So it looks like we have everything working. All the lights are on, it's spinning really well, but no heat. So it's probably one of these 2 fuses, this thermal fuse or this high limit fuse. This one lives about right here behind this panel, and this one lives on a burner tube. It's about the same height here but back a little bit further. So we're going to be testing those out next. We're going to get the dryer out so we can get to the back of it. So all we got to do is unplug the 120 volt plug. And we're just going to wiggle it out. Have more space, and we'll disconnect the vent in the back. Should be able to just pull this one off. Yeah.
Now we're going to remove a series of small 1/4 inch screws here on the back panel, the upper back panel, and that's going to allow us to take that plate off. Once we get the plate off, we'll be able to lift up on the back of this console a little bit, and then we can push this panel toward the back, and that slides it off of a couple of clips. And we can lift up this top and get it out of the way, and then we can disconnect this door switch right here. We're just using a flathead screwdriver to help pry it apart. Take out these 2 Torx 15 screws. Got those out. We're taking off these 1/4 inch screws from the bottom. There's 4 of them. And then we're going to open the door, or then we'll take off these 2 Torx 15 screws from the top. We'll open the door up, and there's 4 screws we have to remove still. There's 2 here that are fine thread machine screws, and then there's 2 that are, and these are Torx 15, and then there's 2 that are Phillips head that are kind of aggressive, sharp, coarse threads. And once we get those all out, we can lift up a little bit and get the entire front panel off. And that's going to give us access to the parts that we may need to replace to get the heat back. So I'm going to close the door. I'll stand up, and don't hurt your back here, but just wiggle and lift. It should come right off. Set it off to the side, and now we're removing these 1/4 inch screws that are holding on the filter housing. And once we get them off, we'll then remove the filter and we'll pull the whole thing out. There we go. I'm going to pull this little plastic plate off, a couple of screws holding it on. We'll remove that. And that's going to allow us to get in where we can test the thermal fuse. So the thermal fuse is very often the one that blows when you have an obstructed vent tube. So I pulled off one of the leads. I have my continuity tester. I'm going to put my leads on there and test it. And I do hear it beeping, so that does have continuity. That one is not blown, but that's the first one to try. So another thing we can check is the leads that are coming off of the element, and there's also something called the high limit we can check. So I heard my continuity tester beep. I'm putting them now on the leads that go onto the element, and you should hear a beep because the element should be intact and have continuity, but this one doesn't. So we need to replace the element. So I'm going to use my needle nose pliers to help me to pull these power leads off of the terminals on the element. You kind of wiggle and push, get them off. And then again, I'll set my meter for continuity and I'll test it out again. But once again, no beep, so the electricity does not flow through it. So what I'll do is just bend this back. There's a screw you can remove, but I often just will bend these down, get this out of the way. And there's a little 1/4 inch screw here on the left side that's holding in the element. So I'll use my 1/4 inch drive to take that screw out. And then I can grab the whole element and kind of wiggle and pull toward me to get it out. So it is kind of uncommon for these to fail. This dryer is actually only about a year old, so this is very unusual. But looking at it carefully, I do see that the spring is missing a chunk of it. So it broke and the electrons can't flow through it, so it doesn't heat up. And the only way to fix it is you have to replace it. We'll put a link in the description.
So here's the new one. We're going to take this off. And we're going to clean that out a little bit first, and we'll slide this in. This accumulated lint, you can see, catches on fire. But you want to get it as clean as you can, so you reduce the risk of fire. On top there's a bunch of lint too. So before you install it, it's good to check for continuity. There we go. So that one's doing great. No breaks in the spring. And also you can check just to make sure that none of the metal touches the frame on the springs. They have these ceramic insulators to push it up higher, but I just want to verify that there's no metal touching the frame, because that'll cause it to continually be on full blast and it won't last very long. Okay, so we're ready to install it. We're just going to slide it in. There's a little screw that'll go in to the side once we get it all the way in. So this thing is just in here by friction. Has this little clip here that creates the friction. Kind of wiggle and push, feed it all the way in. Just line up that screw with the frame. I think that's it. We'll put the screw in there. So while you're in there, just pull out as much of the lint as you can. This one got too hot and caught on fire. It's pretty common, but if you get too much of this stuff and it catches on fire, it can cause a house fire. So anytime you get into the dryer, you want to just clean up all the lint you can to reduce the accumulation. And check the fan blade too, and make sure that you can get all the lint that you can reach. Use a vacuum and get it as lint free as possible. You get a lot of it building up in the cabinet. Usually it means the vent tube is somewhat obstructed, so you got to make sure that the air can flow as best possible through that vent tube. So to get that screw to go in correctly, you can feed it into your 1/4 inch socket. This one has a magnetic head, so it holds it pretty good. You can't really see what you're doing because of the angle, but you could feel where it is. That screw started. And put the power supply onto the element. Wiggle that on. Wiggle that one on. And I'm just going to bend this guard back up and push this back up. Keep the heat in tight. There we go. We got all our connectors on. We got our thermal fuse on. We got our connectors on the high limit, which is this one right here. This one often blows. That's a good one to check. Check that while I'm here. So to get continuity going. One. Two. Okay. See if we can get the terminals on there. Let me make sure we're ready for continuity. Can you hear it? Yeah. Touch these two at the same time. The upper. Yeah, so that one has good continuity. Okay, so it's just the element had broken, which is a little unusual. It's usually going to be that thermal fuse right there, or that high limit in the back. Put these back on. Doesn't matter which one. There's no polarity issue. Go either one. Okay, so we just put on these two screws and this little cover back here. Now we're going to put on the filter cowling. Goes up, over. Actually, I think I'll go in here first, then slide it up, and we're going to add those little screws to hold it. That's my assistant. My beautiful assistant Lily's helping me hold the cowling. I'm going to feed in those screws to hold it, and we're just going to put this all back together. One.
So now we're just putting in the remaining 1/4-inch screws here, and then we'll put on that back panel that goes on the back of the console, and that has a series of 1/4-inch screws also that we'll just zip those in. And they hold on that panel, but they also help hold on the front panel too. Now we're hooking up our vent tube to the dryer and then putting it onto the wall. We're gonna make sure reach in and make sure there's no
panel again. Get it up here.
Dirt or any obstruction, any lint that might be left over. We're gonna get it all out of there. And then we can go ahead and put the vent tube onto the wall, secure it, get it plugged in.
Door here.
And then we can push it back against the wall. When we go up against the wall, we want to make sure we're not squishing the vent tube. Okay, and now it's nice and warm. And the dryer's working again.
We have 2 machine screws going here. These are Torx 15. Machine screw. Machine screw. Got it. Now we're going to put in those 1/4-inch ones on the bottom. 4 of those. Door switch. Connector. Very important. Don't want to leave that step out. Okay. So we got these clips here. You gotta go onto it and then slide